We're going to call to order the meeting for the Liquor Commission, which is meeting first for purpose of presumably issuing a license to the Putney General Store.
PGS Group LLC. So they're transferring the Putney General Store liquor license to PGS Group LLC.
Okay. So, motion to...
I move that we approve the transfer of this license to PGS Group LLC for a first, second class liquor license and tobacco application? Second class liquor license.
Beer and wine. Seconded?
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve transfer of liquor license from previous to the PGS Group LLC. Any discussion? There's no, yes, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, I'm curious, does this represent a change of ownership over there?
My guess would, I don't know the honest answer to that. My guess would be not a change of ownership, but a change of, that they have a lessee or a lessor for the, lessor.
Or a buyer. Or a buyer.
Or a buyer?
Yes.
For the business, but not for the general store itself. That is my
For the
understanding.
business.
For the business,
Yes.
exactly.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
But not a change of ownership of the building, so.
Did I hear the word tobacco mentioned?
Yes, but that was,
That's the name of the statewide organization.
no, it's sort of in the list of,
It's the way it's always been.
It's part of the application process.
So it's liquor and wine.
no,
Or wine,
beer and wine.
Beer and wine, sorry, beer and wine.
No,
But
but
they didn't
tobacco
apply
is
for-
not checked off.
Right.
But in my memory, we don't issue tobacco licenses in town, so
It's not a
so
town issue.
I don't think so.
Right.
So that presumably goes up to the state and then they decide that from there. But, all right, any other questions or comments? No, okay, if there's no further discussion, all in favor of approving?
Aye.
Aye. And
Yeah.
all right, so now we will call to order the meeting for the regular select board. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
I do not. Let's see if
Okay.
this will be good. Well, we can, when we get there.
Okay, approval of minutes from August 14th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of August 14th?
So moved.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of August 14th as presented. Any discussion, any questions? If no further discussion, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye. I have to abstain here, of course. All right. Public comment on items not on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who are here to comment on something other than what's on the agenda?
Well, I didn't come here intending to, but since I'm here, I might as well. You know, for a long time I've been concerned about the safety on Main Street for children crossing the street. Many of us here in the neighborhood have young children who walk to the library and to school and so forth. So I have oftentimes hoped that there would be a way to put in crosswalks or speed humps or something. So I don't know if that's something that the select board can address.
We've had that discussion numerous times over the year. Main Street, as you're referring to it, is Route 5, which is a state road. It's almost impossible for us to do anything on Route 5. We have now a crosswalk over by Basketville The only reason we have that, the only reason they allowed that is because there was no other place to do it. But we've talked about having them across from the library, across from the post office, and they just across the board say, sorry, you can't do it. So much as we would love, actually part of the design of the upper part of the sidewalk and this part of the sidewalk was to have some bump out areas and things, which is what they call traffic calming features, to try and slow traffic down a little bit, but we just have no jurisdiction over it. So much as you could certainly, actually one of our representatives, two of our representatives are here, you could mention that to them and or write a letter to the state about it.
Do you know what part of the state is responsible for that?
V-Trans.
Yes,
That would be who you could write to, I guess.
V-Trans. Mike?
It's not a new issue. We've looked into it a number of times. The last time I did, we looked at the post office, and what we were told is, at those spots where you put a crosswalk, all parking for 50 feet has to be eliminated. And given there's such limited parking there, there wasn't a sense that that would be feasible. Down by the library, if those businesses and the library were willing to forsake parking on the street, maybe that might be an option there. That's one of the criteria that they have, is that you have to have and the reason for that is they need a clear visibility for there to be a crosswalk near there. Certainly something we can look into again and see what we can do. You never know until we ask, and if we keep asking. Years ago, we never thought we'd get a sidewalk.
Yeah.
And we've got people here that have pushed for years to get it, and
It's been almost 20 years.
it's almost 20 years, yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, I wonder if, given the influx of new families into the neighborhood with the Wyndham and Windsor housing now on Old Depot Road and Putney Landing, if that could be more of an argument toward putting in more crosswalks.
It certainly wouldn't hurt, again, to bring it to the powers that be. The other thing that, when Mike said that, it reminded me, the other feature that's necessary typically for a crosswalk is you have to be going somewhere. And since we don't have sidewalk on that side, they've sort of said, well, you can't have a crosswalk to nowhere.
There are people on that side.
I'm just telling you the logic that's there. But I agree, somewhere down near the co-op, because there was discussion, and I don't think it has been added in any way. There was discussion of having a path of some sort from Putney Landing out to near the traffic triangle there. I'm not sure whether that exists in any official form, but that would be another way to do it. And for things like that, there are also typically, part of the reason that this sidewalk process is so slow is that much of it is grant money, and the grant money is slow in coming and goes through various different cycles. But if we thought there was more sidewalk that wanted to be done, and it could be done on the other side for that purpose, that might enhance our ability to get funding for it as well. So, Mr. Fairman.
Mr. Chairman, just as a suggestion, the original entry to Putney Landing now is a pedestrian lane coming out on Old Depot Road.
Correct.
So if a sidewalk were built along Old Depot Road to where it comes out on Route 5, this might justify putting a crosswalk at that point.
Somewhere there. It's a possibility. Any of these things are possible, but it is amazing. I mean, we were just having this conversation the other day that it's just amazing how long it takes to get these municipal projects done, particularly when they include the state road and state funding. I mean, it's just, and federal, which is all passed down from federal funding, and it's just, one hoop after another. It's really pretty amazing. But it happens. It just takes years and years. So I would encourage you to continue the conversation with Mike, continue the conversation, or start a conversation with V-Trans, and also Karen has that conversation.
Thank you so much.
Certainly. All right. So any other public comment on items not on the agenda? No. Okay. Then we will move on to select board items. And the first item on our list is the equity and inclusion resolution, which for those of you who haven't been here, we have looked at this now. This is probably the fourth time we've addressed it in a meeting. There have been some sort of tweaks to the wording and to, not so much to the concept, but sort of the boundaries of the concept. So Laura, if you want to address where we are now.
So one of the changes that we discussed last time was who could actually serve on this committee, whether or not it would be limited to residents. And I discussed this with Carl Landier, who is an attorney for VLCT, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. And he said that since it's not statutory, there are no limitations. We can choose to have anyone we like serve on it. So I took out the language around limitations on who could serve to leave it open for any future select board to make those decisions at the time, depending on qualifications. That's the only major change to it since the last time we talked.
This change is specifically where?
It was removed from item 1. There was language in there originally about folks having to be from the town of Putney, and I just struck that from the language.
One thing we might want to add back into that's related to, I think, the point that Mr. Fairman made of last time we discussed this about not wanting to have a majority of non-Putney residents, that we might want to state something to that effect of saying either limiting the number of non-Putney residents or saying up to 9 with a majority of the members being residents of Putney, or somehow so that it isn't sort of stacked against the town in that way.
Residents or employed in Putney?
Maybe. I mean, again, if these are issues, if these are voting issues, then in my opinion, it should probably be residents.
Correct. Good point.
But we could,
That's
whether that's a
valid
majority or limited to no more than 2 from other towns, and
Okay, so
So-
we can easily write that in,
keep
I think.
keep that conversation.
That,
Yeah.
So let's put interested members of the public, up to 9 members, will be appointed by the select board of the town of Putney.
Perhaps with a minimum of 2/3 of the board being members
With
of.
a minimum of 2/3 of the board always being Putney residents.
The committee, not the board.
Committee, thank you.
What do you do when some people leave the committee and they happen to be Putney residents, so you wind up with exceeding that for the non-residents?
I think I would leave it up to whoever was in charge at the time to address that issue. I take your point, but I'm not, I think that, we could say no more than 2 or no more than 3 being non-Putney residents. But your point, if we said no more than 3, and we happen to only have 5 people on the
Right.
committee, then that 3 could be a majority, so maybe no more than 2 that are non-Putney residents.
I like the 2/3 myself.
2/3, and I think that's flexible enough so that,
If it were to become 2/3, somebody would either have to resign or you would have to quickly get somebody in that was from the
would
town.
motivate
Yeah.
people to.
Yeah, I agree.
Question of procedure, do you anticipate voting on this resolution this evening?
I'm not sure. I think we're anticipating a discussion about this motion or about this resolution and then going from there.
I'd like to vote on it with the caveat that our legal will review it.
That it? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not sure you can do that, because once you have enacted it, it is a town of Putney ordinance.
Well, there's a waiting period. If it's an ordinance, which it's not, it's a resolution.
Okay.
But there is also a waiting period for, and I don't remember how that varies. For ordinances, I believe it's either 15 or 30 or 45 days, I can't remember. But
Right.
for a resolution, there may well be as well. But we can vote to approve contingent on approval from legal counsel. Which then, if legal counsel says no, then we do it again. But,
Sorry.
go ahead.
The new State of Vermont Executive Director of Racial Equity is on the agenda for this evening. I understand she was unable to be present, but I also understand that there is a statement which may be relevant to this resolution.
Actually, Jeannie Comstois just brought that in.
This is the
This is
statement
the statement
from,
from Ms.
Susanna
Davis.
okay.
There's more.
She's the executive director for racial equity for the state of Vermont, hired by Governor Scott. I think she is housed in the Office of Administration for the state of Vermont.
And these are just letters of support from different community members.
She is, by the way, the most powerful official in the state of Vermont, because she has jurisdiction within all three branches of state government.
Oh, interesting.
And no other official does, and there is no federal official who has jurisdiction across the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. So it's really quite an interesting development.
And I assume you might know whether that was recognized publicly in the process of her being appointed to that?
Well, I don't, since it's already been enacted, I simply look at the enabling legislation.
Right.
Because that is the fact.
Yeah.
And the fact is that she and the Racial Equity Council, there is a member named by each of the branches of government. So that although she reports directly to Governor Scott, she will be working in all three branches, which, as I say, is very interesting.
Unusual, yeah.
It's possible that the constitutionality will be challenged because it does violate separation of powers by definition.
Yeah. Any of our representatives want to comment?
Yeah, I certainly don't see it that way. We worked together in other areas similarly. About 10 years ago, the Supreme Court, Chief of the Supreme Court Justice Reiber pulled together a tri-branch commission to have all three branches working together similarly on justice reinvestment, looking at how our incarceration rate was increasing, and we took steps then, this is probably more than 10 years ago, to the point where we've actually lowered our incarceration rate by using other methods instead of just putting people in jail. And that was all three branches working together, and I feel that this piece of legislation was put together for that same reason, because there wanted to be an integration, a coherence between the branches, and all were at the table pulling this legislation together, that this was a concern that warranted such a broad stroke. And I would also add that Susanna can take no actions herself. She is an advisor, and so in terms of her affecting anything, she's an advisor to the governor and then ultimately to the legislature.
Much as this committee would be to
Yeah.
us.
I would add in that regard that while Representative Marucki is correct regarding incarceration, I have in front of me the enabling legislation for the executive director, and I will simply quote the first paragraph. There is created within the executive branch the position of executive director of racial equity to identify and work to eradicate systemic racism within state government. Now, of course, that is a laudable objective, but the point is she is given the power to do it. And that's quite different from the situation that Representative Mawaricki was referring to. And I am not objecting to it. I'm simply pointing out that this is an extraordinarily powerful official, and I believe is unprecedented in Vermont history.
And until it's challenged in the courts, if it ever were, we wouldn't know how precedent would fall on it, but
We would not.
it's an interesting discussion, though. I'm not, other than being an interesting point, I'm not sure it's germane to our conversation here tonight,
Point well
but it is an interesting point.
Point well taken.
Yes.
I'm
Jane?
sorry I came late and I didn't understand the process we were in. Are you receiving comments from the public at this point?
Yes. I mean, we just opened the discussion about the resolution
Okay.
to create.
Okay.
So we're-
I just had 3 letters I wanted to submit, and I wanted to read Mrs. Davis's remarks. So it's a very short paragraph at the,
Oh, yeah.
not the full length of her. So tell me when that's a good, is this a good time?
Sure.
Okay, so when we were discussing this and in the last couple of select board meetings, I had just come off of reading an article that was discussing Susanna Davis's role in the state of Vermont, and so reached out to her and said, you know, the town of Putney is looking at a diversity inclusion, equity and inclusion committee, and she was really excited because there are a number of towns in Vermont that are looking at doing this. And with her new position at the governor's office, is she in the governor's office? I don't understand. I think it's Office of Administration. So she said that she would be happy to come and speak, and as her mandate has gotten clearer, she said I can submit written remarks in support of this work. And so what you have in front of you is the historical context of both a timeline and major events, everything from 1790 of looking at systemic racism in the United States of America, and she very clearly documents something that is a very powerful year-by-year analysis of how in the United States of America we have institutionalized power and discrimination. And so if you look at that document that you all 3 select board members now have, you can see a very comprehensive history. She goes over major impact categories such as the impacts it has had on housing, the impacts it has had on health, the impacts it has had on economics, the impact it has had on education, legal and civic life, and then she speaks specifically to the resolution. So I'll just read the very first opening paragraph from her and the final paragraph, which refers specifically to our resolution. I am writing today to offer my support in favor of the proposed creation of a Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee. By placing such a resolution under consideration, the board is taking a commendable step towards helping the state of Vermont achieve greater equity for its residents and visitors. By passing the resolution, the board would be serving as a leader in the state by demonstrating that it is willing to take decisive action to further the values of a just and prolific society. I offer the information below as historical context to help illustrate why such actions are beneficial to the evolution of legal and social policy in the United States. Further, it would be my honor to continue working with the town to form a broader coalition of towns across the state that will jointly address racial and other disparities. And then her final paragraph on the proposed resolution specifically. For all the reasons listed above and many more, it is imperative that the residents and leaders of the town of Putney take the historical context and projected outcomes into account as it considers the creation of the Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee. While some of the data described above come from other jurisdictions, they are reflective of national trends in every corner of the country, and it is the duty of each state, city, and town to create strong policy that will advance the collective goals and needs of their current and prospective constituents. Therefore, the creation of a Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee would serve not only the current town residents, but also future town residents seeking to build their lives and raise their families and contribute to the economy in a place that demonstrates its values on fairness, not just through words, but through action. I support the establishment of a Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee as described in the proposed rule, and further encourage town members to educate themselves and others about the ways they can participate in disrupting inequity in their civic, professional, and social lives. Respectfully submitted, Susanna Davis, Executive Director for Racial Equity, State of Vermont.
Mr. Chairman, I was prepared to respond to her talk, but since we have just heard excerpts from her statement, which by the way has now become a public record, may I speak to that?
Yes.
All right. Here are your copies. I will be summarizing as I read. You will see there's a small error, which is I assumed that she would be here this evening, so we'll leave that out. Mr. Chairman, the State of Vermont's first Executive Director of Racial Equity, Ms. Susanna Davis, formerly a City of New York government official, now is an exceptionally powerful state official reporting directly to Governor Scott, with broad authority and mandate detailed by Vermont statute regarding systemic racism within executive, judicial, and legislative branches of our state government. The town of Putney, however, is a direct democracy governed by Putney Town Meeting and by our elected select board, who are accountable to Putney Town Meeting voters. We have local control. Although concerned citizens laudably wish to foster racial and other equity and inclusion in Putney, the Town of Putney Select Board's jurisdiction is Town of Putney municipal government. Equity and inclusion jurisdiction otherwise belongs to and is exercised by state and federal governments, including the Vermont Agency of Education, Department of Labor, and Human Rights Commission. These concerned citizens could create a civic organization, perhaps called Equitable and Inclusive Putney, to participate in our civic affairs, including select board, school board, and town meetings, and otherwise. Or you could create and appoint a Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee, endorsing it and its members, inviting their recommendations for your adoption, or explaining and justifying why not. Official Robert's Rules of Order considers standing committees, special committees, and committees of the whole. And it does mention, as has been mentioned earlier, a standing or special committee may include or even have as its chairman one or more persons who are not members of the assembly or the society, such as non-residents in our case. When a special committee is appointed to implement an order of the assembly, it should be small and should consist only of those in favor of the action to be carried out. When a special committee is appointed for deliberation or investigation, however, it should often be larger, and it should represent, as far as possible, all points of view in the organization, so that its opinion will carry maximum weight. When such a committee is properly selected, its recommendations will most often reflect the will of the assembly. All points of view can best be represented at Putney Town Meeting, where non-voters and non-residents can receive permission to speak. The will of the assembly can then be determined by Putney Town Meeting voters acting upon recommendations proposed and discussed while they were convened as a committee of the whole. In large assemblies, the use of a committee of the whole is a convenient method of considering a question when it is desired to allow each member to speak an unlimited number of times in debate. A committee of the whole is a real committee in the parliamentary sense. The assembly votes to go into a committee of the whole, which is equivalent to voting to refer the matter to the committee, and the chairman of the committee is appointed. The committee considers the referred matter, adopts a report to be made to the assembly, then votes to rise and report. Finally, the committee chairman presents the report and the assembly considers the committee's recommendations, all as in the case of an ordinary committee. Complying with the Constitution of the State of Vermont and Vermont statutes, a Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee can only advise Town of Putney municipal government via our town meeting, select board, and town manager. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure that I fully understand, Mr. Fairman, whether you are making a recommendation. I mean, this is very interesting. Does it include a recommendation that would change the outcome of our, or would attempt to change the outcome of our discussion this evening, or?
It includes a consideration that could, because I am suggesting that instead of having a committee, which will have a very limited number of members, and therefore really cannot represent all points of view, that we could do it at town meeting, where people who wish to come from elsewhere to advise us and consult with us are free to do so. Now, this, in terms of Robert's Rules of Order, is the town meeting just saying, now let's be a committee of the whole for a while. My concern is that a committee of 9 members, or any limited number of members, is not going to be representative of the town of Putney, because there are just too many different people in Putney and too few people on the committee. So I'm offering this as an alternative for your consideration.
Point of order?
Yes.
Is this a motion to be voted on?
No. From Mr. Fairman, you mean?
Yeah.
No. Well, it's not presented as such, no.
Yeah.
Well, I can't make a motion, so no.
Jamie, you had a comment?
Yeah, just that it's so special to me to have so many people in the room tonight, and I know a couple of folks in the room specifically are here to speak to this or want to support it. So in the spirit of diversity, inclusion, and equity, I'm really interested in hearing from people who would like to speak in a way that the mic is passed and that the space is shared, because this is a hard time to be here, away from family and away from our jobs. And I feel like it is time to hear from other folks.
Well, that was my next
Okay.
question, was do other people have
Thank
comments they
you.
want to make? So, Mr. Fairman has clearly stated, I think, most of his points. And so if there are there others who would like to speak? And I don't know whether, I mean, as to Mike's question as to whether this was a motion, this was not a motion. I mean, the discussion we're having is to vote on a resolution to create a committee tonight. Whether we do that tonight or another time, the nature of this discussion is to further our perspective on whether we should be creating a committee for the purpose of these discussions. I guess one comment I would have is that taking Mr. Fairman's words into account, I don't see, I mean, all of these committee meetings are subject to open meeting law, so of course anybody who wanted to participate would be able to participate. Also, you know, typically when we have committees for special purposes, if, for example, the Public Safety Committee, if an issue arises out of that we, the Select Board, feel and/or that the committee proposes should be discussed at town meeting, typically we do that. So I don't see this as preventing the nature of what you're talking. I definitely understand and hear what you're saying about the difference between a civic group and an appointed group, but I don't think an appointed committee would necessarily eliminate the possibility of any number of others being involved. Mike?
Thanks. Jamie's point's well taken. I feel there are a lot of people here who would like to speak, and I wonder if an orderly way would be to us have a sign up. Then we can look at how much time we have and set, let's say, we can divide the number of people who want to speak into how much time we have, and that way everybody can get a fair shake at it.
Well, I guess for me, one of the questions is, I mean, are we, my sense has been about this discussion all the way through, today included, there's no opposition from this board about the possibility of creating a committee for this purpose. And I definitely am more than happy to hear people speak, but I don't think you have to convince us. It's for me anyway, and this is a personal statement, it's more about being clear that the resolution we have in front of us is appropriate for the committee that we are intending to create. And I don't see anything in this resolution that would prevent, as I just said, we're trying to, if we approve this, we're trying to create a committee that has the ability to be as inclusive as possible. And I think that Laura has deliberately left this, I use vague in a kind way, so much like Vermont statute, it's open for interpretation. One of the discussions that some of you were here for when we had this conversation a month ago or whenever we last had it, was that, in many ways, I think having a committee that then could reach out to the townspeople to have these discussions is more fruitful in many ways than having them here in a select board meeting. And I'm more than happy to open the floor for people to speak. But my perception would be the place for that would be a forum that is created by and brought forward by a committee, not by the discussion. We are talking about whether to have a resolution to create a committee for the purpose of having these discussions. I'm not disagreeing with you, Mike. I'm just saying, I mean, we already, we've now spent a lot of select board time having conversations about whether to create this committee or not. And again, I don't think there's anybody on this board or even necessarily in this room that feels that we shouldn't have this committee. It's just making sure that we've crossed the T's and dotted the I's. So, but if any member of the public wants to make a statement, please feel free.
So in that spirit, can I make a motion that we approve the resolution of the select board of the town of Putney to create a Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee with the understanding that with a minimum of 2/3 of the committee will always being Putney residents will be added to the language, and it will be reviewed by legal advisory before we actually enact it.
So just to be perfectly clear about that, what you're proposing is that you have a resolution that would include the statement of the 2/3 of the members being from Putney, but that adoption of the resolution, even if we approve it, would be contingent upon
Legal advice.
legal advice.
Yes.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
would you second
I
that?
would second that.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to approve this resolution, just a minute, Mr. Freeman, which allows us to open it for discussion. I'd like to give others, you will have another turn as you need, but I'd like to give others an opportunity to speak if they so choose.
Mr. Chairman, I simply wanted to mention that some of these people may be unfamiliar and have heard a discussion about whether or not they should be allowed to speak. We are convened here under the open meeting law. Every member of the public has the right to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm welcoming that. I mean, the one statement I would make about that, and I don't know, I think there's statutory language to this effect, but I'm not familiar with it right at the moment, but that I, as the chair, am able to limit people in the amount of time that they spend. So, I don't think anybody's looking to jump on a soapbox, but they might be. And I mean that in a positive way, but if anybody would like to make comments and perhaps keep them to sort of 3 to 5 minutes at the most, please feel free.
I'd like to request that they state their name for the record.
Yes, if you could also state your name for the record, please. Annie.
Thanks, Josh. My name is Ann Beekman, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Wyndham Southeast School District Board and the Chair of the Diversity and Equity Committee of that board. And we would like to express our support for this committee. We would like to join. We would like to cooperate. We would like to reinforce the lessons that we have quite ambitiously embarked on for our students in their homes and in their towns. And I've been sent here specifically to express our support.
Thank you. Yes, Nader.
I'm Nader Hashim. I'm from Dummerston, and I just want to make sure that since I'm not a Putney resident, I can.
You are welcome to speak.
Okay,
Yes.
so, yeah, sure. So, Nader Hashim from Dummerston, State Representative for Wyndham 4, and I do just want to express my support for this as well. I don't think anyone had any ideas that I was on the other side of things for this, but I would just like to express my support. And when we look at the numbers of what the populations will look like, especially in southern Vermont, the demographics of this area are changing rapidly. And so this is one of many steps in the right direction. So thank you for all that you're doing.
Other members of the public who might like to make a statement?
I'm Mark Thurman, Diversity Coordinator at Landmark College. I actually have a couple of student leaders here with me today, and we're like in full support of this being passed because we're already doing the work on campus and having diversity and inclusion already growing at Landmark College and having these conversations. I think would be very important for the students that are here, especially someone who was a student at Landmark College and now lives in Putney. I think this would be great because this is all about change and moving towards the future, and I think this is the way to go.
Thank you.
It's kind of already working, the fact that we have students in this room right now. It's beautiful, thank you.
Well, and I would also say, along those same lines, the fact that we're having these discussions in open meeting is meaningful.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that you have goodwill from everybody in here for the whole concept, and as I've said, I think we all share that. It's just a matter of making sure that we have the procedures in place to do it in an appropriate manner. And we, again, for those who weren't here previously, we talked about one of the first sort of tasks of a committee that would be formed would be to have a public forum of some sort that would really be an outreach to the larger community to say, what do you want this to look like? Because we can create a charge for this committee, but the reality is, my experience with committees is that charge is often better kept minimal and left to the committee to create a charge for themselves, because they're going to be much more knowledgeable about what they're trying to accomplish than we are likely to be. So that's sort of how I see it.
Actually, I'm not sure you can do that, Mr. Chairman, because a committee is being appointed to advise you. And I think you may need to state about which you would like to be advised. And I'll give you an example. A speaker earlier read to us excerpts from a statement from the State of Vermont Executive Director of Racial Equity, who has no jurisdiction whatsoever in Putney, but which referred only to systemic racism within state government. Now, the mandate of your proposed committee is much broader than that. It is equity and inclusion of all sorts. So I hope that we don't get ourselves drawn into focusing on racism to the exclusion of other forms of equity and inclusion. And one way to make sure that does not happen is if you gave specific instructions to the committee. If you do not do so, they will be able to do whatever they please, which cedes a certain amount of control, which actually is yours, not theirs.
Yes, I would agree with you, and I think that in my statement, it would not be that we would not give them a charge. I think we would give them a charge, and in fact, sort of an outline of a mission statement in a way is already included in this, as you've seen, the purpose of the Equity and Inclusion Committee. And I think we would give them a further charge. I guess one of my feelings, and we haven't had this discussion amongst the three of us, but one of my feelings would be, one of the initial charges would be to clarify your intent and procedure for bringing these goals of equity and inclusion to the town of Putney. And then further, I think I'm thinking of it as a back and forth. I mean, I think that for us to say we want you to do X, Y, and Z, when in fact, if we create a committee, they think that really what they want to do is P, Q, and R, then, I think that creates room for a discussion for all of us to say, well, really, let's look at P, Q, and R and X, Y, and Z and see how they can come together and create a larger charge/mission for the committee.
I am entirely agree. I'm sorry.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Howard, can you please let others' voices
I can't-
rise in this
Jamie,
program.
it's not your role to say that, thank you.
Thank
But,
you.
and I'm trying to bring it back to that, but,
Thank you.
so,
Hi, my name is Ruth Antoinette Rodriguez, and I'm the co-owner of Antidote Books, an independent bookstore in Putney that has a mission to bring the community into conversation through literature by featuring poets and writers, emerging, established, marginalized, underrepresented, and vital literary voices. And I want to express my support for this resolution today for the Diversity and Inclusion Committee.
thank you. Mike?
Thank you. I want to thank you all for the work on this, and I want to thank the community people who have brought this forward. It's time for this. And I appreciate the idea that this is not a narrow focus. This weekend, legislators and other stakeholders met to begin what will be the Social Equity Caucus. There were people there, people of color, people who identified as queer, people who identified as someone with diverse abilities, someone who I would have called disabled, but I'm learning the terminology that people would like to be referred. There was a Palestinian sitting next to a Jewish person, which made for a good start to the meeting, let me tell you. But they came together. This is not a narrow focus, and I don't hear anybody saying that it will be. But it's time for people who have been underrepresented, who have been oppressed, to be brought to the table, to have their voices welcomed. And I know as someone who, from early on, just struggles with people looking at my name and not being able to pronounce it. It changes the way you think about things. And it's a small thing, but it's who I am. And I appreciate what you're doing. I support this. I hope we can get this going and move it forward. And thank you for this.
Yes.
Sheila Garrett, I'm a resident of Putney and have been involved in this kind of work for many, many years and have been working with Putney Friends Meeting. We have been working for several years together as a meeting to try to understand the things that we need to understand to be able to be more inclusive. And I really welcome this this work on the town level, and thank you for offering it.
I'm Angela Burkfield, the resident of Putney, and one of the co-founders and collective members at the Root Social Justice Center, a civic organization that is working on addressing racial injustice and also collaborating with all kinds of groups really working for equity and justice in our communities. I really support this effort. I think it's really important that that government, whether it's at a local level, the state level, national level, is addressing the harm that's been done, that's been baked into our system since the inception of this country and far before that. We really have to take a look at how we think about things, how we do things, the way that policies are made, and have a lot of people at the table to be talking openly and uncomfortably about these issues. That's how we're going to make change. So I really appreciate this is happening, even though this is not necessarily an easy conversation, and it's not going to be moving forward either. It is really important, and it's happening across the state, and it's happening across the nation too. It may not look that way from the news blast that we're getting, but it is happening at the local level. People are really recognizing that we have to address the oppression that exists in our communities. And so I'm really honored and proud to be living in Putney, one of the first towns in the state of Vermont that's taking this initiative. So thank you.
I'm Ellen Forsyth, and I'm with Sheila in Putney Friends Meeting and doing the work there, but I'm much newer to it than Sheila is, and her wisdom goes a long way. But one of the things that I'm struck by so much tonight is all these things going on in this little town that I've lived in for way more than 40 years and don't know anything about. And that's the type of thing that, you know, I want us to find a way that we're all hearing about all these different initiatives happening, because it's what can give us hope. It can help us figure out who we should be working with, what we can offer to somebody else, what they can offer to us. And I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but if this committee has any ability to be part of that and make that part of a town meeting report, it would make town meeting a lot more exciting. Well, we're losing the school report, so I'm trying to.
Yes.
I'm Griff Stein, one of the student leaders at Landmark College in the Stonewall Center there. And I just want to say how amazing it is to see the type of things that I've been seeing going on campus with us working on getting diversity and inclusion to be more evident going on in the larger area around it. And it's kind of inspiring to see that it's like working on such a larger scale than just in the college itself.
Thank you. Mr. Fairman would make another comment if there aren't others who would like to speak first. Jamie, you also had an opportunity to speak, but go ahead.
Can I share two people's comments who wanted to be here tonight? They're fairly short. Sorry. So I reached out to several business leaders to let them know that tonight's discussion was happening. And Robin O'Brien, who's the general manager of the Putney Food Co-op, had reached out to her board, and I believe you'll be receiving some comments or have received comments from board members of the food co-op. And she also submitted this comment. It's very short. Thank you all. Thank you for all you do for Putney. You hold a lot for our village, and I appreciate it. I am writing as a general manager of the Putney Food Co-op. As you know, the co-op sits at the crossroads of 5 and 91. As such, we see more visitors and arguably more diversity than most other businesses in Putney. We pride ourselves on being an inclusive and welcoming business, and it is absolutely important that Putney, as a progressive and welcoming community, take the lead in embracing the need for intentional and supported work on educating ourselves about diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. I strongly support the formation of a committee dedicated to this work here in Putney. We all will benefit from it. Thank you, Robin O'Brien, General Manager. And then you've also received on your desk comments from Chrissy Lee, who is our new neighbor. And she also shared her regrets for not coming, but I'm not going to read her longer letter, and a couple others who are sending you emails, I believe.
Mr. Fairman.
Mr. Chairman, just a clarification on the resolution that is before you. Are the non-resident members voting members of the committee?
I would say so.
Should they be?
I would say so.
As they are not Putney voters?
No.
Because
I mean, in my experience, it's pretty rare that a committee like this has issues that are actually being voted on. So,
Well, they are being asked to provide you with advice, which means recommendations, which is why I raised the point. Because depending on how a vote goes, it may be decided by non-resident members of the committee. And I'm simply wondering whether this is appropriate involving Town of Putney municipal government.
I'm just trying to think of instances in which they would be voting on anything, and I'm not.
Well, they also wouldn't be the deciding factor because they wouldn't have a quorum. So a quorum would be the deciding factor, and we often take advice from folks outside of Putney when it comes to town issues.
The quorum is not the deciding factor. A committee is free to vote under Robert's Rules of Order. And in a situation where they are debating a recommendation to make to you, the town of Putney Select Board, they may very well say, as is their right, let's have a vote on this.
Yeah.
And when they do, the question arises, should the people who are not, in fact, Putney voters have any role in the actual decision?
Would be appointed by us, though.
So
So they would be people that we have chosen as a community,
I know you have chosen as a select board.
and you've chosen us.
Indeed, we have. And you, therefore, are accountable to voters per the Constitution of the state of Vermont.
I think that would be a question for legal counsel.
Yes.
This committee is not accountable to voters per the Constitution of the state of Vermont.
Correct.
So says the Vermont Supreme Court in Welsh versus Siri.
Yeah.
So I'm raising the point of whether it would actually be, whether you would have a legitimate result of a vote in the committee if members of the committee who are not residents of Putney were involved in that vote. The legitimacy of the vote certainly can be questioned, and it might help the legitimacy of the committee if you eliminated that possibility by saying that they are non-voting members. This is why I raise it.
Be a question for legal from my perspective. You know, I mean, I don't.
And I would also remind that they have no power except to
Make a recommendation.
Make a recommendation
But
to
but
us.
if they can vote to, I mean, again, my experience is that I don't think that happens very often, but I fully understand that they have the right to do it, and that situation could arise where they're voting to make a recommendation or not. I guess, you know, my suggestion to a committee that was in that situation would be to come to us and have a discussion about the two sides of it and try and come to consensus. But as we all know, that doesn't necessarily happen, so I think that's a question that should be asked of legal, whether there's a statutory requirement of
Which
any sort.
suggests that you actually do not have a settled resolution here this evening. We've had a discussion of a resolution.
Right.
And so I'm not sure that it is actually ripe for a vote, because adopting a resolution contingent on an attorney telling you it was okay to do it, I'm not sure you're allowed to do that.
We are allowed to do, well, my opinion would be we are allowed to do that if we are adopting a resolution that's here. I would agree with you if we were adopting a resolution that was going to have verbiage added by an attorney. I don't think we could do that. But we are presenting a resolution that's complete with the exception of what we're potentially talking about right now, and might be a good reason to table it. But if we're voting on something that's fully in front of us, just contingent upon legal approving it as it is, I mean, we've certainly done that in the past, whether it's legal or not. Sorry. Mike.
There's certainly precedent for this committee to move forward right now and for you to vote on it. We have our Affordable Housing Committee in town, which basically takes input from the town, tries to get information out there, and ultimately, though, we serve at the pleasure of the Select Board. The Select Board is the body that makes any decisions around that. I think this is ready for a vote, and I hope we can move forward with that.
Yes. Yeah. We're completing discussion. So, I guess the question would be whether that, you know, the other thing is just because we adopt a resolution doesn't mean we can't amend the resolution 2 weeks from now or a month from now or whatever it might be. So I guess it would be an opinion as to whether we need to have that question clarified before we're comfortable voting on it. You know, the other thing I think that I've already stated and that you've seen, we're all in support of this resolution. There's no debate about that. It's a question of making sure that we have the details correct, and Mr. Fairman is taking us to task on some of that. So whether this is one, you know, I mean, one thing we could do is table the resolution, but make a clear statement of support for passing the resolution upon completion of review. We've essentially already done that at a previous meeting, I think, but not stated it as clearly as that. So, you know, I think that I hear what you're saying, Mike, and that, you know, it does make a statement to go ahead and approve it. If we make the statement that we intend to approve it, but it's going to wait 2 weeks, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Jamie?
I wondered, what was the first date that we began the discussion of a resolution to create a committee?
It's been about
June 19th.
Oh,
I was going to say in June probably, maybe in May.
Oh, we talked, it's June 19th is the first email I have.
That was the first meeting about it.
Yeah.
I wondered when other committees were formed for the town of Putney, the level of attention that they received and the analysis and the delay in the formation of that committee.
Very dependent. You know, each case is dependent on various different things. I mean, there are certainly committees that have been talked about for long periods of time. You know, this has been sort of a more focused discussion about the details of the resolution to create this committee. But that's our job, is to be thorough in what we're creating. And again, I mean, you know, if I was getting either a sense from the people here or on this board that we were still at odds about creating a committee, that would be a very different discussion, in my opinion.
So I would ask that you pass this committee this evening and not table this resolution.
Okay.
I have lots of things I don't understand about this I'd like answered first.
Okay.
I feel, you know, I'm a little out of my depth here, don't know anything about this kind of meeting, and just started all this, and tons of stuff to read and questions to ask and answer before I feel like I could intelligently vote on this. That's how I feel. I would like to see it passed, and I'd like to do it right. And I think maybe we should table it. I think maybe we should talk to legal counsel. I don't know what our liabilities would be. What's the committee? Can they only do what we task them with? I wouldn't even know what to task them with. How would they advise it? Would they advise us about what? You know, what would we have any legal authority over anything? I don't know answers to any of this stuff. I'd like answers to all this stuff. So that's how I feel. But I'm in support of it, but I would like to do it right. And I can't say that I would know how to vote on it without answering those. And I need to read everything you brought tonight. I need to read all that stuff.
So that sounds to me like a vote from one of our members to table this. I know you would love not, or I think you would love not to table it.
Well, I appreciate very much that David wants to take the time to educate himself. And I think that hinders work that needs to be happening yesterday. And I think that, David, it could take years for you to educate yourself on this, honestly. I don't always feel fully educated on this, and that's why we're developing a committee to help us. So I'm not willing to table it. I'm sorry. I really want for us to vote on this tonight.
Okay, well, that leaves me in a as the deciding factor. I mean, I totally get what you're saying about this all being work that needed to be done yesterday. I also am fully aware that we've got decades of work ahead of us, and if not, centuries, millennia, etc. And is 2 weeks a pivotal amount of time in that process? I don't want to say, but then 2 weeks from now, we could have the same discussion and it would be 2 weeks more, which is what we've had happen. But to Jamie's question about how long it takes to do this, it takes as long as it takes. And that, from my perspective, that's the most important thing. And I have, in fact, had people leave committees because I have said, if you don't want to sit here at the table and take the time it takes, you shouldn't be here. So, it takes as long as it takes to create these things. We are making a decision about creating a committee, which we're all in favor of creating, but if we do it without doing our homework thoroughly, then we've done a disservice to all of us. So,
Exactly.
it's a balance. Jamie.
I heard a quote once that Martin Luther King said. It was really powerful. And I Googled it while we were talking, and it says, "For years now I have heard the word wait. It rings in the ear of every Negro with piercing familiarity. This wait has almost always meant never. We must come to see with one of our distinguished jurists, the justice too long delayed is justice denied." Martin Luther King Jr. And one of the ways that systemic power perpetuates itself is through thorough analysis and inaction before a moment where you feel like you have to take action. And so for me, the pride of this moment of us all being here together is that I don't think it's very often that we come together in a large group at select board meeting. Is that accurate? Am I missing it? This got me so
When there are issues that are important,
Yeah.
we get plenty of people.
Yes. So this, to me, is an issue of such great importance that I just ask you not to delay, that delaying these kinds of, just to form a committee, is a sign of inaction, and that the words of saying we all support it but we don't want to do it wrong ring hollow. And so what I ask is that we pass it, and that I ask that we do it and then continue the work, because there is so much at hand and it's such a great opportunity.
And I feel like that's what our motion did. We have honed this to the point where it's, I think, half the length it originally was. And I feel like we are submitting it to legal. This is a vote of intent.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you. I think that the question of whether non-Putney members would be voting members or not is a question that the committee could address potentially and make a recommendation to us to amend this if they felt it was necessary.
Point of information.
Yep.
The Planning Commission of Putney has authority to, have non-Putney residents on their board.
Correct.
On their committee.
Yes. And I don't know whether they're voting members or not.
Yes, they are.
They are. Okay.
We don't have any, but they have the authority to do that.
Yeah. I think that, I'm pretty sure that Mr. Fairman is also in favor of this committee and just trying to get the details right. That's, I'm just surmising, that's not mine to judge. But I think that the question of whether having a 1/3 portion of a committee that were non-residents that had the ability to vote, and you accurately pointed out that you need a quorum to vote, if that quorum were 3 non-residents and 3 non-residents and 2 residents, then that creates an imbalance in that. I would also agree that this is intent. I understand your concerns about the legal implications of it, I would say that, you know, in general, Vermont law would stand behind good intent over a mistake in a situation like this. We're not legally liable. I mean, we are legally liable, but we can't be held. I'm not sure how to state it in a way that means you're not going to get in trouble for having passed this resolution.
I'm not really afraid of getting in trouble.
Yeah, no, I know.
I'm really good at getting in trouble. It doesn't scare me at all.
You've been there, done that.
So,
my makeup.
for mine too, that
That's not what I'm
VLCT
talking about.
has, I've been
Right.
working with VLCT's
Right.
attorneys
Right.
on this, so
Right.
it's not,
It's not, no,
I'm not
and we've been
recreating
talking
the
about
wheel
this
in a
for several
resolution,
months.
yes.
So, I guess it would then be a question of, you know, are we comfortable enough? And Jamie, I respect your quote, and I fully hear what it's saying. I would like to respectfully state that we're not overanalyzing, or perhaps we are overanalyzing, but we're trying to accomplish something. We're not doing this in the absence of thought and the interest of having it proceed. So it's a good and meaningful quote. I don't want to be looked at as somebody who's trying to hinder this for the purpose of this, and that felt a little bit like it was implying.
I don't want to
So
deal with it that way either. That's not
you know,
what my
I
intent
think
was
that's
at all.
not what we're trying to do here. So, but I also hear the statement.
I think there's a really easy way to demonstrate that, and it's through voting in support of forming a committee to create diversity, equity, inclusion. Because the feelings that you're having right now that prevent you from taking the vote are the exact feelings that I had when I was told by a friend of mine that some of the things that I said were harmful to them. And I got angry, and I got resentful.
You're projecting, I would have to say.
Okay, but what I'm just saying that whatever the feelings are of protection, whatever it is yes, and I'm projecting, thank you for pointing that out. But I had feelings when I was told that I was behaving in a certain way, that I wanted to protect myself, and I had to go through a process of movement, and I still get frustrated, and these conversations are hard. And so I just ask you to please, all this is asking is a resolution to form a committee. It's not, and I've been present at the meeting since June, and so I think the lack of a vote for me represents the fear that comes up around this stuff. And how, and we've had since.
You're projecting.
Can you let her finish?
Can you let her finish?
Yeah, sorry, yes, go ahead.
I guess just the end of it is the month of June and the month of July and the month of August. I guess my question is, as you were recognizing that there was some stuff that was coming up that I remember David saying something that I really agreed with, and I was really grateful to you, and I said thank you. You said, I don't know what I don't know. And I was like, that was an awesome thing to say. And that was something I really appreciated before. And so to me, I wonder what work has happened since June 19th that you've individually done in your own studies to educate yourself around the upcoming vote on this issue and in the last 2 months.
I can speak to that.
Go ahead.
Not enough, not nearly enough. I think you're projecting that I'm afraid. I'm not afraid. You think you're projecting that I'm dragging my heels. I'm not. I feel like the town of Putney asked me to come here and be on the select board, something that's so far out of my nature. I'm a really private person, live my own life, don't ask for any help, I live and work at home. I'm trying to educate myself on how this process works, but I take the responsibility of representing the town of Putney and the people who asked me to do it very seriously. And I'm going to take as long as I need until I feel good about voting on it. And that's because I take that responsibility very seriously. And I'm not afraid. I think this is a good thing, and I really want it to happen. But for me to vote on it right now, not knowing what I don't know, feels irresponsible to me, to them. That's what I feel.
Yes.
Oh yeah, one of the things, and thank you your comment and for your questions that you say that you have about the documents that you received today. But one of my questions is, what are your questions about, what are some of the gray areas that you still have pause on, and how can we make steps to make sure that you have your questions answered so that you feel comfortable?
I write down questions every time that we have a meeting. It's like, what would that committee do?
Okay.
What things would they address? What responsibility do we have legally? Can we make any difference? I know really nothing about the world that you're talking about, and I need to educate myself more. I have so many questions about that. I'd like to sit down with Laura and talk a lot, because she obviously knows a lot. I'd like to talk with Jamie a lot. That would be great. I would love that. I'm not afraid of learning more. I just don't know enough in this moment.
Yeah, and I'm with all due respect and with candor, I just would like to maybe see some of your questions resolved and some of your questions answered, and so that absolutely. Clarity happen as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I think that's the work of this committee,
Agreed.
is helping. So if we don't form the committee, it's going to be really hard to answer your questions. Because I can't sit down and talk with you about this outside of this meeting.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to put like, we all know that.
Something I need to learn.
We all know that, but not everybody else knows that we can't talk outside of these meetings. We have a quorum too, and so because of open meeting law, I can't have a conversation with him about all of this work happens right here.
Right.
And so.
And that's complicated, but yes.
Yes, and I'm sorry I forgot to, or I didn't know that I should have stated my name earlier when I commented before this discussion started. I'm Jessica Green. I'm a resident of Putney. I'm a mother of 3 who are waiting for their dinner right now. But I'm happy to be here and witness this discussion. I just want to say that I was really sad to have to see the landmark students leave without seeing the resolution passed. You know, I imagine, and I might be projecting as well, but I imagine that it took a lot of them, especially those who are of color, to come and sit and speak to this committee and to open their hearts and ask for this resolution to be passed, and then to have to leave without seeing it passed and to see it mired in the same bureaucracy and red tape that it's apparently been mired in for many months. And I know that it must be a daily reality for them to be here in a primarily white village in a very white state of Vermont. I would love to see us be the most welcoming that we can. I am Jewish, my children are Jewish, we look white, but we're also representing an ethnic minority here in Putney, and it's been a real privilege of mine at the Putney Central School. Each December we have brought our menorah to school and lit the candles for the children in my kids' classes, and seeing these kids' faces light up who've never seen a menorah before, they've never heard words spoken in Hebrew before, and to see that excitement at being exposed to something brand new, I would just want to bring more and more of that to Putney and expose these kids to as much culture and diversity as possible. So it made me feel sad to see those kids have to leave here without seeing this resolution passed before they left, because it's got to just feel like a door being slammed in your face. And then I might be projecting, but it feels like a door being slammed in my face as a minority myself. So I would really just ask that you really consider the emotional reality of ethnic and racial minorities in their everyday existence here in Putney, and how these little things can make a really big difference to people. And I think that as Jamie had mentioned, the systemic ropes and chains that are around us in all of these bureaucratic processes are what keeps inaction happening and what keeps these things being so difficult. I mean, it's hard enough to get a sidewalk
put in, let alone get a racial diversity committee. And with all due respect to our fellow community member in the front row, I think he's had his 3 to 5 minutes already to speak. So I would love to see a vote happen tonight, and I thank you so much.
Yeah, no, Mr. Fair.
No. Hi, my name is Michael Luciani. I'm the Vice President for Student Affairs at Landmark College. And I may not understand the scope of the full scope of the discussion here, but if the apprehension to vote on this resolution is because of the 2/3, 1/3 Putney residents, non-Putney residents, and whether or not they can vote, would it make sense to remove that from the resolution and have it deliberated, that question deliberated another time for the ability for this resolution to be addressed tonight?
I think that's a possibility. The other possibility is to leave it in and it either works its way out or we address it and amend it at a later time if we feel that's appropriate.
The point being, if that was the point of apprehension for voting on this tonight,
How can we move past that?
Right.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Do I need to stand up? Okay. My name is Shannon Cheney. I'm a resident of Putney. I live in the Wyndham Windsor Housing Apartment Complex, Putney Landing. Just to kind of, I'm not new to the conversation because my child goes to PCS, and I know, you know, the issues that have been swirling around the town of Putney with regard to the committee being formed and all that. I can tell you from conversations, and there's one of our friends and neighbors who wasn't comfortable coming tonight because she and her family have been targeted. As a family of color, not only in Putney Landing apartment complex, but also the town of Putney, the co-op, the library, the general store, the school, just about everywhere you can put your feet down in Putney, they have experience. And I texted her at length to make sure that she was comfortable with me speaking about this, because it's not my place to speak of it without permission. So I just want to put that out there. And one thing I can tell you, and this is, I'm only going to speak from the interactions that I've had or the things that I've witnessed, because I won't speak for her. I don't know what that experience is like for her and her family, other than what she's told me. And one thing I can tell you is that when another resident's children and another resident are throwing the N-word around like it's nothing, at a 7-year-old child or a 5-year-old child in front of my 7-year-old, because they have not been taught that that's not okay, because they don't have that experience, they don't have an outlet for that kind of educational opportunity. Even if they go to PCS, it doesn't, just because you go to a great school like PCS doesn't mean you're going to be like, hunky-dory, like kumbaya, we all get along, everyone loves each other. It's not like that. And it'd be ignorant to think that that's actually the case. When her child comes to my house and says, I don't feel comfortable because so-and-so is outside, because they're throwing things at me and calling me the N-word, then that for me becomes my problem and my torch to start carrying a little bit more, as not only a Putney community member, but as a human being. Like, that is never going to be okay as far as I'm concerned, and where I live doesn't matter. If I lived in a mansion down the road, it shouldn't matter. Just because we're low income and we live in Putney Landing doesn't make us any less. There's no crosswalk at the co-op either. We have to go Old Depot Road and all the way around. So if you want to talk about difficulty getting around and making sure it's safe, look at your own front porch and decide if some person of color, a child, a grown-up, whoever comes running to your door, would you open it without hesitating and saying, gosh, I wonder, I don't know if this person is safe or not. Would you do that if it looked like me? Because I feel like these are questions that a lot of our neighbors are asking because they're not used to this housing complex type of stuff happening in the town of Putney. This is new. One of the people who lives in our apartment complex is in fact the one that reported Curtis's. So I understand why Curtis's and Sarah and everybody else who was involved in their being shut down and all the things, the negative things that affected their family, their business, their livelihood, their feeling of safety, whatever it is. It came from one person over there who is one of the only people who is causing the most problems. Wyndham Windsor Housing knows about it. They know what's happening. I've reported it. Other neighbors have reported it. But the problem is there's nowhere to go save me coming here or her coming here and exposing herself. And she's there's no childcare. She would have to bring her children. That's not something she's comfortable with. So I said, well, I'm gonna be there. Can I say something? And she said yes. So that's why I'm bringing it up, because I think you guys need to understand that's not just, while I completely respect wanting to have the information before you vote and having whatever you're feeling, just everyone, not just you, Mr. Babbitt, but everyone.
Thank you for telling me.
I appreciate the need for your comfort level being just as important as our comfort level. That shouldn't ever be a question. But what needs to be remembered is that when you look like me, you can walk around and it's not a big deal and it's comfortable for the most part. But when you look like someone else, like these kids, and we're finding out that neighbors are taking pictures of people who are coming to visit them because they have out-of-state plates, and they report them for being drug dealers because they're black. Now this is the stuff that these people have to deal with on a regular basis, on a daily basis, in and out of their apartment, just what, to go do laundry? To pop over to the co-op to get some maple syrup? Whatever it is, they leave their house, they're exposed to this. And this is not just in Putney, but since we're specifically talking about Putney, I moved here from New Orleans 11 years ago. You want to talk about a diverse community coming up to like, not. That was a bit of a shock for me. And I'm from Oklahoma, so like I'm used to super whiteness. But I've immersed myself. I've surrounded myself with people who have the same feelings about these things, and thank God my children have the same sentiment. They don't see any. They see people, and thank God for that, because I can at least look at myself in the mirror and say, like, I'm raising kids who aren't going to just drop the N-bomb like it's the most normal, natural thing in the whole wide world in 2019 in the state of freaking Vermont, which is one of the bluest damn places I've ever been. And so, it's really frustrating. Again, with respect, knowing that I understand why you want to table it, why you would like to just get some more information, the legal thing like that, I get it. But when you're not facing it on a regular basis, when you walk out your door, walk to your car, have neighbors taking photos of you to make sure that you're smoking a cigarette and not a joint, that they're taking pictures of license plates when your family is coming to visit you from Boston, just because you have mass plates, that makes you a drug dealer because you're black. So keep that in mind when you're tabling things and when you're not so sure if it's important enough to go forward or wait 2 more weeks.
I think it's
Thank you.
important enough. That part's not right. Everything else, thank you for telling me what you told me. You're right, and I don't experience any of that, so thank you for sharing that. Thank you very much.
Nodder.
One thing I would point out, and I agree, thank you. We won't have any jurisdiction, unfortunately. We will, what this would change is creating discussion. The town of Putney will not have any legal jurisdiction over situations like that. And I would encourage you, I think you said you already have, in that issue, in that situation at Putney Landing, that is definitely an issue that Wyndham Windsor should be addressing. And I don't know what their right to address it is,
has been involved.
but yeah.
The Sheriff's Department has
Yeah.
been involved.
Good.
This particular person has terrorized me personally, and I'm not going to go into the whole situation with my family, but one of these people is the problem. They know she's the problem. They will not get rid of her because of her mental health issues, and they refuse to label her a criminal, which on one hand I do understand, but at the cost of my family being terrorized, other tenants, other residents of that place not wanting to have their chairs facing out the window because they don't want to have any part of what's happening outside. When we're all living like that, and the Sheriff's Department, I've spoken to Deputy DeVito, I've spoken to Trooper Van Valkenburg, because they've all been up there so often, because these people are calling the police because they're living while black, and on other people for other reasons, myself included. And they say it is also not their jurisdiction, that this is a Wyndham Windsor housing problem. So when you go to the housing people and they say, this is not something we can handle because of privacy issues, I can't tell you if we're sending them letters to, we can't tell you if this is happening, we can't tell you because of privacy, and then you go to VSP, you go to Wyndham County Sheriff's Office, you go to the court in Newfane. I have a no stalking order against one of these people. It doesn't matter, she violates it every day, so I'm supposed to call 911 every single time she does it. So that puts the onus on me to handle someone else's nonsense. So when you say jurisdiction, it's a little bit of a sticking point for me, because we feel like as a community, those of us and the neighbors who still get along and aren't cuckoo bird crazy calling 911 for no damn reason, we all have to band together, and we've actually communicated. We've been like, we don't know what to do. We don't know what to do because we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. If we respond heavily, we're punished. I get a letter saying that I'm in the wrong because I responded by defending my 2.5-year-old and 7-year-old to her children who were throwing rocks at his head.
I'm not trying
So
to
Wyndham
say.
Windsor, no, I know, Wyndham, but what you're saying is, so it is a Wyndham Windsor housing problem, they don't handle it. VSP can't really, Sheriff's Office can't really, they have actual crime to investigate, do you know what I'm saying? Like, they have other things they need to be doing.
And all I'm
So-
saying is that the formation of a committee
Yeah.
is gonna create discussion around that, but we would have no enforcement ability beyond, I mean, our enforcement ability is the VSB and the Sheriff's Department, and that's.
So if we should create a committee so that we have
yeah.
someone who does have the jurisdiction to make different decisions and go to different routes and do other things.
We don't
we
have
would
that.
Well, the committee would be a good starting point, and I would really appreciate if we could just get something, because, you know.
Can I add that creating a committee like this not only creates discussion, but it helps influence systems. And when
Yes.
you influence systems, you change culture.
Yes.
And that's what we're looking to do here. It's a piece of what we're looking to do.
So I'm feeling like, Nutter, you wanna make?
May I add a quick comment? Just to the earlier idea of the unanswered questions that are lingering there. I can empathize with you, David, very strongly, because as a freshman legislator, you know, I was entering this world where all this information is coming at me from experts in many different fields, and you have to accept, what I had to accept and what a lot of people have to accept is that you're never going to have all the answers to your questions. And the topic that we're discussing tonight is something that I hold near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I've studied, and I still have a very long list of many questions that can only be answered by talking to the right people and by engaging in these different systems like these committees that would answer these questions. And so I would just advise that if you are seeking to have answers to all of your questions, then you'll never actually accomplish what you're trying to do, because you'll never get all the answers to all the questions that exist. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you for saying I don't expect to get all the answers, and I'm really glad I said I wanted to table it, because the things I've learned since I said that have informed me a lot. So I'm really glad I said I wanted to table it. Thank you. I don't know, I have a serious hearing impairment, and I didn't hear your name.
Me?
Yes.
Shannon.
Shannon?
Yeah.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you very much for what you said. It probably, it informed me more than anything has. Thank you. I'm not even aware of the things that are happening in this town. You know, I live up on the hill. Thank you.
I hear an awful lot of unanimity here. I think that I would be most comfortable if you voted in favor of this tonight. There are some minor questions. There always can be changes to things later on.
Yeah.
So I would feel very comfortable if you voted, even if David felt like he needed to abstain from the vote, thinking that he can continue to research this on his own. You can amend the resolution in 2 weeks if you need to. Seems like there's been a lot of preparation and a lot of agreement about that you want to do this. I think you're close enough.
Here.
Mr. Fairman?
The lady who spoke from the back has raised, of course, a number of excellent points. You have pointed out that they thought that they are outside the town of Putney's jurisdiction. They probably fall within the jurisdiction of the Vermont Human Rights Commission. But what she has really raised, it seems to me, is that our need is for even more than a committee. It is for Equitable and Inclusive Putney, a civic organization that is free to organize not just within Putney municipal government, but throughout the community to establish, to attain the goals that everyone has talked about this evening.
I wouldn't disagree exactly. I would say, I mean, again, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. So you know, whether they need to be two different entities or whether a committee creates a format for there to be a larger civic discussion. I mean, there's nothing about a committee that prevents them from having gatherings, forums, any way they promoted, they want to promote it. So I don't think that those two have to be exclusive of each other. But
You are correct, except that they can only deal with what falls within the jurisdiction of Town of Putney municipal government.
that's true, although they could certainly be the impetus for formation of a civic group if that was a more powerful group for a valuable reason. So,
Sure.
But, all right, well, I think we could maybe close discussion and have a vote.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
So if this motion moves ahead and there's changes to the resolution, is that the select board? Will you decide on that through legal counsel? You'll make the changes?
We're making one change tonight.
Yeah.
Which will be included in a resolution that we would be voting on.
Okay.
So it was moved with this language in it.
Yeah.
So that's the resolution we're voting on. So then if we wanted to amend it, it would come back and we would vote to amend the resolution.
Okay.
So, exactly. You know, as I think I said before, my opinion would be that that discussion and impetus to make a change might well be rooted in a committee saying it really should say this, that, or the other thing. But, you know, this, as we talked about before, this is enough of sort of a vague boilerplate that it leaves it pretty open to interpretation for how we choose to charge the committee and how the committee chooses to.
Okay, I just want to be clear on that.
Yeah, but, all right, so it has been moved and seconded, and we've had in-depth discussion. So at this point, I think we're ready for a vote. All those in favor of approving the resolution to create a committee for equity and inclusion?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain.
You're going to abstain? Yeah, good. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for planning it. All right, I'm guessing some of you are ready to go home. I know I would be.
Can I go make sure they sign in?
Yes.
Thank you all for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody who spoke. Thank you. Jamie, thank you. Shannon, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Fairman, thank you.
There should be a sheet. Folks, we need to continue our meeting, so I quit stretching. Okay.
All right.
So, we're going to have less than 3 to 5 minutes for each of the following items.
No, we're not. It's my turn now.
Oh, great.
Jeez.
No, it's not your time yet. Okay, so resignation of a lister and appointment of a new lister.
Right. So Karen Shapiro has given us her letter of resignation. It's actually effective August 28th, 2018, not September.
Okay.
And then Jordy would like to recommend Doug Harlow has expressed interest to fill Karen Shapiro's position. So as an elected official, the select board may appoint Doug Harlow under the recommendation of Jordy Heller.
Yep. So I would like to just start by thanking Karen for her service as a lister. She's been doing it for a year and a half, 2 years, something like that, and I appreciate what she has done with that office. And then I would entertain a motion to approve Doug Harlow as a lister as recommended by Jordy Heller.
So moved.
Second.
If there's no further discussion, Mr. Fairman?
Mr. Chairman, would it be appropriate for the town to invite other people to signify interest in becoming a lister?
there's been an open
Yeah.
list. I don't know whether we have specifically reached out on that, but yes, but it's hard to find people, and having somebody who's willing says to me, and also, I mean, I know Doug personally, I know his experience, he was a banker, you know, he's got good people skills, I think he's a good person for the job.
He's semi-retired also.
And he's semi-retired. But to your point, he would be filling, when is Karen's term up?
March 2020.
So he would be up for election in March anyway.
Yes.
So it's really a temporary appointment, sort of no matter how you look at it.
Right, I'll take it.
But we also have, do we continue to have an open position? Or because Aileen, there isn't, okay, because that's a possibility too. But I think it would, you know, basically be an appointment through March, and then we go from there.
Yeah, because Eileen is still
She's still,
filling in, yes.
okay, yeah. So it's been moved and seconded to approve Doug Harlow, to appoint Doug Harlow to the position of Lister. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, Town Road and Bridge Standards adoption. This is basically
Annual.
just annual adoption of statement that essentially we are confirming the information that we have on this document. Is that correct, Karen?
Yeah, this is the state town road and bridge standards that they like to have all municipalities comply with. We actually do a little more to bring our roads up to standard. So each year they have each town adopt.
And we have to
these-
verify that we are complying.
Yeah,
essentially.
they're mandated regulations, basically.
It's the same standards that you approved the last 5 years?
Yes.
They may well be a little, you know, they tend to change them a little bit at a time. I mean, for example, recently, I wouldn't be surprised if these include language which I'm sure I read, but I wouldn't have recognized different from last year because of new water runoff, exactly.
Because of
So it's different language.
Stormwater runoff, so you have to have your roads crowned a certain way.
It raised the,
Yep.
it's sort of a different layer of criteria. So essentially they update them a little bit and then
Yeah.
reapprove them.
You know, ditching on the sides and,
Crushed stone in the ditches, so
Yeah.
the distance away from the culvert.
right.
Mr. Fairman?
Mr. Chairman, would there be any significant financial impact on the town of Putney?
Of approving this?
Yes.
No, well, essentially, what not specific to this, but if we don't do this, I would have to guess that it would take us out of running for certain grants and things.
Correct.
I mean, it's essentially a document stating our compliance and our willingness to comply. So
Correct.
if we weren't doing that, for example, we get grant money to get the crushed stone that has to go in the ditches. If we don't comply with this, I'm guessing they would say, well, then you can't get grant money for that. So that would be the implication.
Frankly, after we just received the new report, the updated after the storm.
Yeah.
Did you, and after reading that, let's
Yeah.
approve this, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. So, motion to approve the
So moved.
town road and bridge standards. Second?
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the town road and bridge standards. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, tax sale update.
Tax sale update, we had 5 properties on the tax sale list yesterday. We sold 2 to neighboring abutters. So we collected another 16,000, Alyssa, roughly. So overall, we did well. We started in June with 30 properties at the tune of $148,000 and we reduced that number to
30 something?
Yes.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well done.
We chase a lot of money.
So the ones that have not been settled, they're still going to be up for sale at some point, or people are negotiating to delay the sales by saying they're going to pay, or?
I predict they'll be on the tax sale list next year. One has to have a probate opened up, so legally we can't sell it until that happens. But there is somebody that would like to keep the property in the family, so we're going to try to work with the 3 people and see if we can get them off the list. But in a year's time too, there'll be other properties on that list. Because for last year, 2018, there's $100,000 outstanding in property taxes. In Putney, it's a 2-year cycle. So, but we'll collect as much as we can in 2018 as well. But Melissa did a really good job. We worked well together in reducing that delinquent tax. And water sewer is the same. So we've been chasing water and sewer.
But we can't put those up for tax sale.
But we can turn off water connection and we can also put a lien for sewer.
Right. Then that's the other thing. With these properties, none of these could transfer. If there's taxes due, we are by default a lien holder on the taxes. So if any of these properties were to transfer, we would get paid.
Right.
As long as it's sold for money. So, but there is sort of a no man's land on some of these uncollected tax properties. Some of them have been floating back and forth, and there's one that's been like 11 years or something.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's no, essentially it will take somebody's passing and then an estate settlement, and then the town will collect on the lien, and otherwise we're left without recourse.
Legal counsel did say we can do a judgment lien, but I'm not at that point yet to do that.
But it also doesn't, I don't think that does us any good, does it?
Well, when it sells, then we would be right there to be paid.
Right.
So.
But we can't force its sale,
No.
other than at tax sale.
Right.
So, all right, thank you. And thank you, Melissa, for your work. Audit update?
So John Mudgett was here for 3 days. We got a lot done. We have a little more to do here in the office to provide him a little more information. He is away most of September.
Okay.
So maybe October we may have a draft.
Okay.
But he seems satisfied with everything we've given him thus far.
You worked with John last year, right?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I just couldn't remember the time. Of course you did. Yeah. I mean, John is very familiar with our audit process and numbers, so I'm not too concerned about him being, and that may end up being inconvenient for you to have no communication for September, but, and presumably there's somebody in his office who could communicate if need be.
Yep. So that first step is completed.
Okay, good. Dummerston Putney joint account.
So Charlotte, the treasurer of the town of Dummerston, mentioned that the bank needs verification, some minutes from the select board meeting to set up the joint account. So it's recommended that a motion be made that we set up the joint account with Dummerston. So it's a Putney Dummerston bank account with Community Bank in Brattleboro. That's where the reclamation fund is sitting right now, Josh. So it makes sense to keep it there. The CD is sitting with TD Bank.
CD, which is reclamation funds.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And it hasn't matured yet,
Yeah.
So there needs to be a decision whether we leave it at TD Bank or we bring it over to Community Bank and possibly just put it in one fund.
How long till it matures?
They didn't give me any information on that.
Yeah, I mean, if it's,
What is it, like, people
they can
says
be
it
any,
like
they can be anything. They can
every
be
year.
60, they can be
Yeah.
lots of different
Yeah.
things. So I think we should know that. I mean, my feeling would be let it run out with, we don't want to take a penalty on it for
No.
cashing it out
No,
early.
we should
So,
let it mature.
Exactly, and then
And-
transfer it.
Right.
That would be my feeling.
So Charlotte did share that there's about $12,000 in each one.
In the reclamation fund and in the CD, is that?
Yeah, so
Okay.
$24,000. Does
Okay.
that sound about? I remember $20,000.
Yeah,
number.
somewhere in that
Yeah,
range
yeah.
sounds right. Yeah, and that's all obviously earmarked for reclamation. So do we need to take motion on any of this?
You do. You need to, I recommend you make a motion that you create the joint account with Dummerston. So it's both towns are on that account. Because
So
right
let's-
now,
let's start with that.
Want us to be bank specific or?
community bank.
Okay.
Yes.
So moved.
So-
To create a joint account.
So it's been moved and seconded to create a joint account for the purpose of the reclamation fund for the gravel pit. Unless, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, I wonder whether there is a legal agreement. You know, it's one thing to say, this is what a bank account is for, and that's all the bank knows. Is there a legal agreement between the towns of Dummerston and Putney stating the purpose of this fund?
There is. There's an interlocal, there's something called an interlocal agreement.
Thank you.
And I don't remember the exact language related to the reclamation fund, but the nature of the discussion surrounding it was that we would share a fund that we would each contribute to this thing. And actually, how it's funded primarily, and I can't remember whether we're doing this, but historically, there's been a small amount per yard used
Yes.
that goes into the reclamation fund,
Right.
so that in theory, it's fully funded when the time comes. But Alan?
Is there also a separate operating fund that's already working fine?
In process. I mean,
In the budget.
exactly. As it is right now, it's a component of our highway budget.
Yes.
So now that we own, because we were budgeted for purchase of gravel, I mean, there's two separate parts to it. There's if you're specifically talking about operations, right, for this year, that's coming out of our highway budget because when we created the budget, we had not yet purchased the gravel pit.
Right.
So as we're going into this fall, there will be further detailing of which, sort of how that works.
So at some point, there may be a joint account that will pay for operating expenses as well, and that each town will pay into, or?
We hadn't talked about it being that way. The reclamation fund, we have, I think that essentially, we're each responsible for certain aspects of things, and that's in agreement. But then it's sharing of the costs of individual things. We didn't talk about it as a joint fund. That's something that may, the other thing that we had lots of discussion about is that this is going to evolve, and that we may find, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, that's a better way to do it.
Anyway, you have assistants working on it.
We're trying.
Right.
Yeah. But again, as it's funded this year, it's because we already had our budget before we did this, so. Okay, so, and then, do you want action on the CD account, or do you just want that we would, my recommendation, a CD comes to maturity,
Absolutely.
you maximize the profit from it, so.
Right, and I
so-
don't know if it's, moving it from TD to community banks.
Potentially,
more
exactly.
money. So the treasurer needs to figure that out,
Yeah,
and Charlotte will do that.
so let's not take action on that right now, but it would be our recommendation to not take a penalty on maturity of the CD, but allow it to mature
Correct.
and then move,
Maximize our
and then
profit,
move the
whatever
funds.
makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because those CDs are making, you know, just fractions of percentages every year. And then signers, that would be signing, do we need to approve somebody for signing? Is that what that is?
Obviously, it has to be the treasurer, so Scott Henry. But Alyssa is also the assistant.
This is signer for this joint account that we just
Correct.
talked about? Okay.
Correct. Because we have to have a signer from each town.
Right. And they both have to sign in order for anything to happen with funds?
Right.
Right, okay.
So when we create this joint account, I need to have the signers ready to go. So,
I would say that it should be the treasurer, or in their absence, the assistant treasurer, or in their absence, the chair of the board.
okay.
Does that seem logical? I mean, you know, in theory, we never would not have a treasurer or an assistant
So
treasurer.
that means you're
but-
staying on for another 3 years.
No, it's not me, it's whoever's the chair. It doesn't have anything to do with me.
You're the chair right now.
Yeah, so,
Well, and this is my point too. So if the chair of the select board, being you right now, come March, we're gonna have to send somebody else to the bank. So I'm not sure that we actually need 3, but definitely treasurer.
find out, an
Yes,
assistant,
Yes, and the assistant.
yes. Yeah, that's fine, if there needed to be a third.
Right.
And my guess is that statutorily, in the absence of a treasurer and assistant, although I'm not sure, I was gonna say that that would
Yeah.
fall to the chair, but I'm not sure that's true, actually. Because since, well, actually, that probably is true now that the treasurer position is appointed and not elected. When it was
Right.
elected, it would not have fallen to the
Yeah.
select board because they were independent, but, so we
I
can
can
find that
look
out.
at-
But for
yeah.
the time being, I think the treasurer and the assistant treasurer make sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Want to make a motion?
Do you
Do
need
we
that?
need a motion?
Yeah, go ahead and make
Sure.
that motion.
I move that we appoint the treasurer, and then in the treasurer's absence, the assistant treasurer as signers for the Dummerston Putney joint accounts, joint reclamation fund account.
And I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the treasurer and the assistant treasurer as the signatories for the Putney Dummerston joint account for reclamation. If there's no further discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So I have one other item with the gravel pit while we're talking about it. We're gonna be putting a request for a cost proposal for crushing gravel and ledge. So that is going out this week. And bids are gonna be due back by September 11th in Dummerston. And then they'll review them, we'll get copies, we'll have to review as well.
And are we hoping to do that work this fall?
Yes,
Okay.
they want the crushing done by November, the middle of November. So November 15th,
And that's compliant with Act 250?
yeah.
Yeah.
And there's like 5 companies we'll solicit to,
Okay,
so.
sounds good. All right, town manager's report.
What do I have? Sidewalk status, I don't know if anybody's noticed the sidewalk.
Good.
Oh, I noticed. No, I'm not allowed to step on it.
Not yet, not yet.
Yeah, don't.
It might be cool.
Yeah, you either, Al.
It's on my way home.
I know, mine too. Hampered.
So half of the sidewalk was poured today. The other half will be poured tomorrow to the end.
Not today.
We're hoping people can walk and drive across it by Friday night. They're doing such a great job, and it's moving quickly. The lights are now installed on Vinegar Lane.
Good.
They have power to them. There's going to be a final walkthrough probably in a couple weeks, because there's a railing that needs to still go up, and they've got to take care of the driveways.
So you're gonna have a celebration?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, we are.
Ribbon cutting?
Yes, I would like to have a
The big
ribbon
scissors?
cutting. Yes.
Do we have big scissors?
No, but we can get
We
some.
can probably borrow.
Yeah.
I bet the landmark has some.
exhibits?
Believe it or not, we don't. We had to rent them last time.
But you know a source.
They are incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So
To
Michael.
purchase, you mean.
Or-
Yeah.
What, the scissors?
Yeah.
Got some hedge trimmers?
So Michael, do you have a question?
So the question, 2 questions. So Saturday is when we can let students know it's walkable, or should we wait?
I'm gonna call you.
Okay.
Should we wait till there's a fence?
That was my
No,
second
there's
question.
There is no split rail fence, that's not going up until probably next week, but we've asked the contractor to put some caution tape on all of the stakes all the way up. So it's gonna be roped, and it'll be designated where they can walk. So if they go over that tape, then, I mean, they go
That
over.
might be a question for the contractor, because I would guess it would fall under his insurance.
It would
So
be
that-
his
we
liability.
might
but-
want to know that, at least so you can inform that they're supposed to or not supposed to. So we should find that out, and you can let Michael know.
No, Jack Durrell from Pathways said they
Oh.
should be able to walk on it this weekend.
Oh, just with
So,
caution
yes,
tape? Oh, okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so,
So,
and that's with tomorrow being the second pour, and then it'll be solid enough on Saturday, that's the idea?
Correct.
Okay.
correct.
Do you want to confirm that, or you're confirming it right now?
No, I'm confirming that.
Okay.
I've been in touch with Jeff and Steve.
So if for any reason that's not the case, Karen will be in touch with you.
Okay.
So if it rains tomorrow and they can't pour, they can't use that sidewalk,
All right.
okay?
It doesn't look like that's going to
Right.
happen, so.
Yeah.
And their forming was mostly done, so I
Right.
think they're on target.
Yeah.
so.
No, it was 2 days. Twin State is doing the pour,
Yeah,
and Matt in that picture, he was spraying down that
yeah,
accelerant to speed up the curing process.
yeah,
So, yeah, they've done an excellent job.
looks good,
Yeah.
Mr. Fairman.
Question for the town manager. Have you heard yet when they're scheduled to install the fence?
Sometime next week. So the concrete will cure, and then he'll be back out next week with the split rail fence. So it's going from the telephone pole past Robinson's all the way up.
Sure.
So,
I would wonder in that situation whether if the sidewalk has been opened and a planned fence has not been installed, whether that creates liability for somebody.
That's what I was questioning, and we have a supervising engineer who has said that's not an issue,
Right.
but you might want to just double check that.
yeah, the contractor definitely needs to designate the walking area. I mean,
It may be that sufficient caution tape
Right.
covers that liability, but I do think it's a question worth.
See, of course, the reason I raised it is because caution tape would not actually stop anyone.
I hear you.
But, you know,
I totally hear you.
offense. So it may be, it could be creating a situation which, people were invited into a situation which was actually unsafe.
So Karen's going to confirm that, and she'll, if the circumstances are different than we think, then we'll let you know.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Have a good night.
You too.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
Michael.
By the way, I've been curious, and probably this would be a good time to ask, do I understand correctly that Landmark College paid part of the cost of the sidewalk?
Yeah, sorry.
It's in process, and a final payment is due. But yes, they contributed, I want to say $175,000?
$180,000.
$180,000 towards the construction of this sidewalk.
Didn't they split the portion that we, after the grant, what was left from the grant, they split it with us? So our portion-
That may have been some of the figuring, but that figure doesn't represent that, so.
Right.
I think that was just, they decided on that commitment, and I can't remember.
It's phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3.
Okay.
And phase 3 is almost $600,000, so.
But the grant covered 80% of that?
80%, yeah.
So 20% was left to us. And
Yes.
Right.
And they
Right.
covered 175,000 of all three. 180, I'm sorry,
Yes.
of all three.
Yeah.
Phase 3 vinegar lane.
What was that?
No, phase 3 is what we're doing right now.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, one was from here to the library. I mean, not here to the library, here to the co-op. 2 was from here to where it,
Ended by.
no man's land,
Yeah.
and 3 is now.
Yeah.
So, and as we talked about earlier, that discussion was started before I was on the select board, and I've been here for 14 years now, so it takes an incredibly long time to do this. But we're almost there, so that's good. All right. East Putney Brook Road, bridge closure.
So the bridge by Brookside Campgrounds,
Yes.
I had conversation with the state, and they said you need to close that bridge immediately. So I had Brian go out with the Jersey barriers. He blocked the front of the bridge. Westminster had put the rocks up on their side, so there is no access from Putney or Westminster.
Cars. and
Correct.
trucks,
Correct.
Bicycles and pedestrians and stuff.
No one can be on the bridge, not even walkers,
Right.
because it's unsafe.
The deck, it's a wood deck and
Yeah.
it's failing. So, and in the same vein as the liability for that question, we should make sure that if we need signage.
Signage is already up.
It is, okay.
Yeah,
okay,
and
okay.
the other side of the bridge is also blocked off
Okay.
with, wood and signs. And
Okay, good.
so we've done our due diligence to warn people it's a liability, stay off, it's unsafe. I'll be working with Mark Pickering to figure out, do we keep what's there for pedestrians or?
Speaking of that, it's the East Putney Brook Trail, and it's very actively used by people for recreational, walking, cycling, lots of cyclists, ATVs, snowmobiles, you name it, and it's very actively used. I go there occasionally, and lots of people go by me. So I think we should also take a long-range view of what we are going to do in the future with that bridge.
Well,
I would limit it to pedestrians, and getting it up to snuff for cars, I think is silly.
We can't, the state has told us that.
No, I don't mean now.
Yeah.
I don't mean
Yeah, yeah.
now, but
Yeah.
to just say, well, let it collapse like the other bridge further in.
Right.
I'm not, that would be a big recreational loss, that's all I'm saying.
I don't know, it wouldn't surprise me, and it might be, there's a specific group you said uses it, or?
No.
It's just that it's.
It's
East
well
Putney Brook
used
Trail.
by
Yeah.
hikers, cyclists, people who like to be along the brook and see
Yeah.
what it's like.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was an opportunity for grant money for something like.
Yeah, that's what I'm
pedestrian
saying.
lighting, and I'm not sure if that.
Yeah,
I mean,
not a
typically,
big
I think
upgrade.
those are within municipalities, but it's something to keep in mind.
It's a segue, so
Oh,
Wyndham
there we go.
Regional Commission, I'm on the transportation,
Yeah.
I'm on the board, and they're doing a pilot program, and they asked if Putney would like to be,
The pilot.
yes, and I agreed. So there's money, we're gonna look at all the trails, all the legal trails, and try to connect, so it's a bigger,
That's an important bridge for that
Yes.
trail, because
Right.
if you don't, that river is too big.
It's hard to get in, yeah.
It's hard to access it without that bridge.
Yeah,
that is
no, I
my
agree.
first project right there.
There's an access
That
off South
road,
Coastline
yeah.
further up the brook and
Yeah.
some cars are going that way.
And Westminster also agrees they want to keep it open as a pedestrian trail, no motor vehicles.
Okay.
So I agree with Russ, and we're going to try to make it work. So we'll see what the pilot program is about. So.
I'm guessing the Conservation Commission would
It'd be nice to keep that bridge open.
Yeah.
Well, I hear
I see
you.
that.
There was some talk too of the adjoining landowners wanting to know if the town was interested at some point in redoing it because they were thinking about developing that.
Yes.
And then that seemed to all stall when they found out it needed to be take the route to
Right.
class 3 before
Yes.
we would maintain
Yeah.
it.
Exactly.
Right? You know what
But that's a,
Wasn't it?
So
Not there.
it's class
that's Turner
4.
Trip, yeah, that's
No,
Turner.
no, there was one by the King.
Yeah, no, I know,
Yeah.
but I don't think they explored the bringing it up to class,
There was talk about it.
Class
was
3.
there? I don't
Yeah.
remember that, but.
Well, it's a
yeah.
legal trail, it's, class 5
Right.
is a legal trail,
Yeah, yeah,
so, yeah.
Right, no, I understand that, but the people who own, yeah, no, I remember the
Campus,
discussion
right.
about owning, about somebody potentially wanting to develop. I don't remember having a discussion about it needing to be, but it would be incumbent upon them if they wanted
Right.
to use it for.
But all those properties beyond the bridge, they have access either from Mill Street or East Putney Town Farm Road.
Mill Street.
Yeah. Is it Mill Brook?
Mill
Sorry,
Brook Road.
Mill Brook Road, yeah.
You go
Yeah.
across the bridge of Mill Brook Road.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Headed toward Quarry Road, and then there's already a road off to the left,
Great.
which, does that continue to be Mill Brook, or is that?
I'm not
Quarry
sure. I
Road?
can't remember
Quarry
where.
No, it's not, it may not even be a town road, it may be a private road, but it's going in, and it would, you could access that land from that road if you extended it. It may be a private road.
It's on, it was on Stanley's office, just past Great Western.
yeah, Mill Brook and Quarry is up there.
You remember we went out there and it was
Yeah,
like
we
a
were-
nothing road?
Yeah, and I'm like, we're gonna get stuck out here, Alyssa.
Literally, it goes back over the bank.
Hey, just follow your Google, just follow your thing and it'll take you through.
Oh, here's the map right here, guys. No,
All right,
oh no, yeah.
anyway,
Anyway,
that bridge has
moving
been
on.
closed
Yes.
and it sounds like things are afloat to try and get it improved for
Yeah.
usage.
So now keep you
Okay.
updated on the pilot program.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right,
Mr. Chairman,
announcement,
Howard.
yes, sorry, go
I
ahead.
beg your pardon. A question to the town manager. You mentioned a grant from WRDC. Do you know how much money?
I don't, so our first meeting is gonna be like in 2 weeks, so I'll find out.
Sure.
I'm very optimistic and excited about it. Yeah.
All right, and then you just wanted to announce that property taxes are due on Friday, the 30th.
Friday the 30th of August, 4 PM. You can bring your tax payment, you can put it in the front door. If you rely on the post, we're not gonna be responsible. We've had problems with the post office getting mail and payments to us. And it's not just one person, it's several. So we had an incident where 3 payments didn't get to us on time. They were charged interest for water, sewer. They were all deposited on the same day. So it's like, what happened to the mail? So, and
Because I deposited them the day that I picked it up from
Yeah.
the
So there,
And we deposit all checks the day we get them. We do not hold on to checks. We get them, they go in the bank.
You used to hold
Yeah, note to long-term residents, not business as usual.
No.
No longer a 6
On a
week to 3
slower
month wait.
collection period, it goes on your
Might be.
account the day we get it,
Yeah,
so that there's no worry about getting late fees.
right.
It may not go to the bank the exact day if it's a slower, but it will be within 2 or 3 days,
Right.
for sure.
So we've been making deposits now for the last 2 weeks daily. And, I just wanted to update, the board too, if I can find this slip here. So we have to collect another, within 2 days, outstanding for the first installment, $472,264.83. So we have already collected 1.4.
Million.
Yeah.
For the first payment,
Yeah,
and more for the other.
right.
Right, and
And,
you said some of those were payments of people paying their full amount.
and we've had full amount payments for the year, which is really
A lot of them.
extraordinary, yeah.
Wow.
So this is what we collected. There's the second and there's the third installment. So 2.2 million is what we've collected thus far.
Is that
No, you said you,
So 1.4
for this?
first
Yeah.
installment,
you've already collected those on
and
payments?
second and third.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
so that's the total right there.
That's unusual. I don't remember that happening last year.
Unusual but good.
Yeah.
No,
Is that unusual that
no.
people pay that much?
No, so what I predict is we'll collect another 300,000, maybe 350,000
Okay.
by Friday.
And then it'll all sit for quite a while.
That's interesting to me that people do that. I would rather sitting in my savings account
Are you
collecting
like offering
interest
some
than-
incentive I don't know about? I should have thought my whole year's taxes account.
All I know is I've got 2 ladies that are gonna be really busy for the next 2 days. And I wanna thank them too, Lisa and Kim, because there's been a lot of traffic in here. You can pay online too with credit card. If you go right to our website, you can.
Not yet.
Oh, not yet?
We're still waiting on Bob.
All right, so you can pay with a credit card here. There is a 3.25% charge by the bank, but it's an option.
So the taxpayer pays that in addition to the.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
All right,
So that's the good news.
warrants. Unless you have anything else in your town manager's report. That's all you have listed here.
No, I was looking for the warrants number.
I move that we accept and execute the warrants as presented upon completion of review.
And I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve and execute the warrants as presented. There's no.
Can you just spend 30 seconds telling me what that is?
Yes, so discussion, warrants are basically as bills come in and/or payroll concept builds up, and checks are prepared to go out. Technically, we are the only ones that can approve that expenditure of money, so we need to approve warrants to be essentially saying, yes, these checks can be sent. And so it's just documentation of accounts payable, payroll, any monies that are expended. But without a warrant, they're not payable. So it's been moved and seconded, and we've had some discussion. If there's no further questions, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So payroll warrant dated August 23rd in the amount of $10,608.15. This is library, very few lifeguards at this moment.
School closed or not quite?
No, Monday?
Monday?
I think we only have, what, 2 lifeguards left? 3.
Was today the first day? Was that today?
Tomorrow's the first day of school,
Okay.
and it's a half day.
What?
Yeah, it's first day hooray. It's
Day
only a
first day.
half day.
They sort of get settled in, have a barbecue.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, so they have a party.
Just like when we were.
Yeah, it's
Introduction.
introductions. Yeah, and then the big
First day
when
hooray.
everybody goes.
Yeah, no hooray.
Kind of
My
dipping your
first
toes.
First day, first
But it
day.
also- but it was also after Labor Day.
Yeah, that's true, that's true.
Check warrant dated August 30th, 2019 in the amount of $10,005.13. And this includes the fire department. Accounts payable, August 17th through August 30th, in the amount of $233,154.77. The big ticket on this warrant is for Zalusny for the sidewalk, $158,161. And of course, we will get 80% of that back from the grant. So the balance to finish the project is $200,725. So we will have at least one more big invoice for our fee. And I have not seen Pathways invoice yet. Their contract was for not quite $50,000.
And we paid them some or nothing? We paid them some up front, didn't we?
No.
Is Amston Electric for the lighting? What's that?
That's library.
Library?
Yeah. They're all in here too, if there's any questions.
Mr. Chairman, a question, perhaps for the town manager. How is the Landmark College contribution to the sidewalk accounted?
Well, when the project is complete, then they will send us the $60,000.
It would be accounted for as a donation.
Right.
I don't know whether that's your question.
It is. I'm wondering how it would go into the book.
Yeah.
That's the answer. It's a
Donation.
donation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would be, the revenue would go towards that project. It would show in there and then it would.
So it would offset the cost of the project as opposed to going into the general fund.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I know there might be some overages, towards the end,
I'm guessing
but.
highway department. Chesterfield tire, $7,400, that's Greater tires?
Greater tires, $6,600. The invoice is right in that packet.
How
many tires? And then there's a back row tire for $700.
Yeah, the back row, we need to replace one of the tires. I think we
Boy,
got
I could have had a
4.
lifetime supply for that
Yeah.
I just put 2 tires on my tractor and it was $1,200 for the rear tires and they are tiny compared to the rear tires. So,
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
plus those greater tires are
Yeah.
rugged.
Yeah.
On another note too, we just made the last payment on one of the fire engines, the 1994. And next fiscal year, we'll be paying off 3 pieces of equipment, or 2 pieces of equipment and the chemical feed building.
Unfortunately, nobody wants new equipment, so we're all set.
Yeah.
So we have Salmon and Nostrand. Is that the total for, this is for gravel pit, I'm assuming?
That was for the closing.
For the gravel pit?
Yes.
And so is that our complete bill with them
Yep.
through closing?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no.
I mean, I know there were other bills previous to that.
Yeah, I'd
but-
have to total
yeah.
those up, but
But
that
that's-
was
but
for
that's
the
the end of
title
that.
research and the closing.
Okay. Oh, I
Did you
just
sign?
Little late there.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say, don't you have to call in before 8 if you want to?
Yeah.
Give them up. I brought dinner with me.
No.
Smart.
Did you bring some for me too?
I did. Isn't that so nice of me? Some for Josh.
All right, so any other business?
I have one.
Go
Go ahead, no, you go ahead.
I
Al.
have just a question, which, don't know. There's a piece of property just 2 houses down from ours,
Who has, oh, yes.
on the
Yeah.
right side of Route 5.
Looking north, yes.
Looking north, yes. That used to have a lot of junk in it and now has an extreme amount of junk. I wonder if the town has any role in trying to preserve the safety of the resident or the snow plows. I know this is a state highway, and so the stuff that's in the state right of way is probably not the town's business, it's the state's business. But
And one clarifying point about that, we do not, as a town, have a junk ordinance.
we don't. Okay.
So we do not have any enforcement ability over that.
May I add?
But,
But the state is aware
Yeah.
of the situation.
Okay.
and the particular part that the state comes in is new legislation that reduces the number of vehicles one is allowed to have on a property.
I see, so there is a state junkyard.
There's a
right?
junkyard,
Yes.
exactly, yeah. But
So is that?
What about the stuff that's in the way of plowing? Does that They,
That, so if you want to come talk to me about this,
Yeah.
I can give you more details.
Yeah.
We are aware of it. We are
Yeah.
working with the owner. The Tom Gardner is aware of it.
Good.
It's a little different situation. It's not just junk cars. So
I know.
it's very delicate right now. And I'm working with the state, and Vinny is working with his supervisor to figure out how to handle this.
But it's two separate things. I mean, the junkyard
Right.
ordinance is the
Right.
cars, but as I said, we do not have an ordinance down. I mean, essentially, other than vehicles, we cannot tell somebody what they can or can't have on their property.
So, does the vehicles count both sides of the road? I mean, he owns the property.
Yes, any one property owner.
Yeah.
I think. is-
Yeah.
Right, since he acquired it at separate times, I didn't know.
Right.
Yeah.
We are totally aware of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm working with the state to find a resolution, and we have to be tactful about it.
Absolutely.
So, please be patient. I know.
It's been 30 years.
I know, but the thing is, winter's coming and you
So-
see a
so
whole
what's the
lot
rush?
more.
Yeah.
It's beginning to look more like a wall, and that's something.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. I get it.
Well, you can't, so.
I get it.
Yeah.
I was
All
trying
right.
to add some levity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other business?
So I just wanted to add, so something developed this week, and I spoke to Brian about it. It's up on East Town Farm Road. So right at the junction of Mountain View, which turns left, and then East Town Farm still continues out.
Yeah.
So right at that junction, it becomes private. So it's a
Right.
class 4.
Yep.
It is by the order of the select board,
So it's privately maintained. It's not private.
privately maintained.
Because we have
We
the
have the right
right
of
of way.
yes.
Exactly.
So there's a logging outfit up there right now, and they're hauling tandem trailers. And I've been in contact with the logger. I've spoken to Brian Harlow. The fact that we don't maintain it is not a town issue. And somehow I'm in it. So I'm trying to work with all the parties.
This is a problem we've had on that road.
So,
At least a couple times in the
So
past.
we have landowners, taxpayers on that road that don't want the log trucks on it, but because we maintain it, we don't
we
maintain it,
don't maintain
then
it.
we have no
And we have no obligation to
obligation
maintain.
to, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the sign? I don't know, it looks like somebody altered the sign, and I'd have to ask Brian. But, you know, this doesn't belong there.
I was gonna say, we should get the
Where's the
select
inclusion?
board. Yeah.
Where's the inclusion? So,
That's interesting though, that it's been altered, like that they took town out. That's what it looks like to me, that's a town road at
Yeah,
one
we
point.
probably did, yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
They whited it out.
so I just,
Mr. Fairman, sorry.
Question, this is a public meeting, what does the sign say?
I just wrote on
It
it.
says non-maintained, it basically says non-maintained, this road is non-maintained.
So it's a standard,
He faced it.
yeah, it's been altered.
I can see.
By me too, so,
Well,
but only on that road.
I'm ignoring the manuscript part, but it seems as though the person is asserting some sort of right over the town right of way, which is interesting.
By blocking out the word town.
Well,
Yeah.
I know that in the past, when this has happened, there have been, essentially, whoever the managing forester is responsible for, and I'm sort of shooting from the hip here, but my understanding is that whoever the managing forester is responsible for coming up with an agreement that is a acceptable to abutting landowners for the use of that private, quote-unquote, privately maintained road, because this.
And that
this
did
same-
not happen.
And that did not happen.
No.
And so, and is the forester / logger trying to make right by it?
He
Or
is.
saying it's not
He
their
is.
problem?
So I've
Okay.
spoken to him. I've spoken to the parties, 3 different parties on that section of the road. I've had an attorney contact the office. And I'm trying to get them to all work it out together.
Even though as we're not really actually obligated to do any of those things.
No, technically we're not.
No.
Gotcha.
So I just wanted to give you the heads up because I don't know how this is going to turn out.
By the way, Mr. Chairman, that's my understanding as well, like what you said, which is why I raised the point. Because these tandem logging trucks are among the heaviest trucks on the road. They're right up on the 100,000-pound limit usually.
Yes. Yeah.
Which of course can really wreck a road.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly, you know, as far as jurisdiction is concerned, we could say no tandem trucks on that road, on Easttown Farm Road.
Yeah.
But we can't do that on the trail. I don't think that's a concern at this time of year. If it was mud season or otherwise, then I think we'd be
That'd
more
different.
worried about it.
Brian's not concerned with the trucks running
On Town Farm
town.
Road. Yeah.
Yeah. I did meet the logging truck when I was coming down, and he pulled right off to the side. He was very courteous. He stopped, he let me go and 2 other cars behind me, because that road is 35 miles an hour. There is signage out there, but, you know, I mean, they have a job to do too, so, I'm hoping they can all work it out.
But they are obligated to maintain that road. That's my understanding anyway.
Right.
So, all right, good, thank you. Thank you for bringing that non-town issue too.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, thanks for staying.
Yeah.
Is this diving?
Oh, yes, never a dull moment.
It's not over yet. Thank you, Howard.
You're welcome.
All right, and we are going to have an executive session.
Yes.
So
No
we
decision.
will not be making a decision
No.
at this executive session. So motion to enter executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to enter executive session and without any decisions at the end. So we will vote on that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sorry, lost my train there.
Great.